Hello, everybody. I am making a TAS tutorial for Punch Out the Definitive project. Now, this is going to cover pretty much everything that you should need to know. Hopefully, you can just get started once you watch this. Now, first things first, we're just going to jump right in. What do we mean by TAS? Because you might know what a TAS is. It's a tool-assisted speedrun. Usually, you would use an emulator to kind of put in inputs yourself for each frame. Now, you'll notice that if you know what this is Scratch. Now, this is a website, so you can't use an emulator. Because some of those don't exist. And even if you could find an emulator that would emulate a website program, not all emulators are created equal, and you probably wouldn't be able to TAS on this. Emulator. So, what do we mean by TAS? Well, when we say TAS, usually what we mean is we just mean manipulating the RNG. And the way that we do that is we go over here, we go to see inside. Now, what this does on Scratch, it allows you to actually see and edit the code of the game. So, we are going to go to, let's use, who's a good opponent to use? Von Kaiser is probably a good opponent to use. So, this is where we really want to go. This is pretty much exactly what we're doing. So when we manipulate the RNG, we're manipulating attacks. We are changing the code. I'm actually just going to move over a little bit so that you can see more. So, we are changing the values. So we're going to take these out. Now these values are pretty much just RNG. This is what you can set to. So what we can do is we can change the code. So usually Von Kaiser has 2 attacks you can do, but if we only want 1, then we would just change that. So now he's always going to pick 2. It's no longer random. We've manipulated the RNG. Now usually on these earlier opponents like Gabby J, Glass Joe, Von Kaiser, Disco Kid, basically, optimally, we only want to change this once. And we can do that on certain fights. We can only have to change it once on Von Kaiser. We only have to change it once on Disco Kid. But there are certain fights that do need more RNG, but we'll get into those later. So, this is pretty much it. This is a pretty basic way to TAS. It's just changing it so that we can only do 1 attack. Now, you'll notice that when I go to Von Kaiser, so we're going to go to Von Kaiser, and you'll notice that because we have changed the RNG, he is only going to do 1 attack. He's only doing uppercuts. He's never going to do his jab. He can do 1 of 2 attacks, usually. He can usually do a jab or an uppercut. Now you can see he's only doing uppercuts. So that's pretty just simple way to do it. That's just kind of the basics. Now sometimes, now we're going to move on to directionals. Now you'll notice that actually on Von Kaiser, he's switching the direction of his uppercut occasionally. Now you actually can't get the star. So if we were only body blows and he threw a right uppercut, then we actually wouldn't have gotten a star. Because you need to use a right body on him to get on the right uppercut. But we're going to call that directional attack. So in the future, if I call it a directional attack, just note that it's the same attack. It's just that it has 2 different directions and it has 2 different ways to get stars. But what we can actually do to change this is that we can go down to his attack. Extend a little bit, getting there. So here we are. So we change it to number 2. That means it's going to draw from here. This is the attack that we were doing. So you'll notice that we have this. This is you're gonna see this with every directional attack. It's why they are directional. Now you'll notice that we have DL, and DR. And what those values mean is that this basically is the set of code that makes it so that when you throw a left gut punch, that's what you get a star off of. So, to simply change it, all we need to do is this. That's all you need to do. And now, because we've changed that, we can now get a star off of his right uppercut, even if we do it left. I'm actually going to demonstrate that right now. Sorry for moving the camera around. It's a bit difficult time. Need to get the camera to stay still. You'll notice that even when he does that right uppercut, we still got a star off of that. Now, this is really good for directionals because at the end of the day, it is RNG which direction they go into. And remember, we're trying to manipulate the RNG so that it doesn't matter. So, trying to go back up to, where it was. There we go. So that's basically it. Now remember, this is for only one attack. So those are the fights for where, well, we only want one attack. This is for when one attack is optimal. But on some fights, actually one attack isn't actually optimal. For example, Gabby J and Glass Joe. On those two fights, doing one attack actually is not optimal. The optimal strat is that they would do a hook and then they would do a rush. Now, that is two different attacks. So you might be asking yourself, well, how are we going to maybe do that? Now, on some fights, you will actually have a bit of time to get the star, dodge, and then press the C inside button to change it. But usually, and especially on later opponents, you will not have that time. That will actually not be possible. So, you actually notice up here that I have this pause button, and it does exactly what you think it does. So, we're going to go into this fight, and here we are, Gabby J. So we're just going to wait a little bit, boom, pause. It paused the game. You know, like a pause button should. But you'll notice, since the game froze, we can now actually just change the code. Now, what I suggest now, remember this pause button, I'm just going to warn you, if you don't use it really correctly, it can actually manipulate the time. So you have to make sure that you are doing it correctly. And if something impossible happens, like them doing an attack too early, you just need to try again. Now, the best way to do it is to pause during an attack. Because if you pause during an attack, you can actually change it. You can pause, you can go into the code, you can change it to what the next attack you want it to be, and then you can just unpause. And then that's it. That's all you need to do. So, just when they do an attack, get the star, pause, change the attack, and then unpause, dodge. Now their next attack is going to happen when it needs to, and it's going to be that attack that you set it as. So that's how we're going to deal with opponents that have more than one attack is optimal. Now, something to note is that pause button, that is not part of the base scratch. You can't actually get that without getting an extension. There are some ways, you can even code actually a pause yourself. I don't recommend that though. I tried it for hours, I watched tutorials, I could not get it to work. There are extensions that you can get that just makes it easier. Mine is an extension. So I would suggest just looking into that. Just get one that works is pretty much it. Now there are fights that don't require it, but once you start getting into major, world, and special, you are really going to need that pause button. Because there are a lot of fights that have rush type attacks, and there are a lot of fights that have guaranteed attacks, and you do need to change them. Now actually, guaranteed attacks at the start of phase 3 or things like that. For example, Piston Hurricane is always going to do uppercuts at the start of phase 2. Those are actually really easy. You just need to knock them down. You go to C inside really quick. You change the attack. Usually opponents will get up on like 8 or 9, so you will have time to change the attack and get back. It's pretty much as easy as that. So now that we've covered 2 opponents now, we're going to actually talk about unique opponents, because there there is actually one fight with a unique mechanic, and that is Aaron Ryan. Where is he? I can never find him. Here he is, and himself, Aaron Ryan. Now you will notice that there is actually Aaron Ryan has his own thing. He has his own variable. Is right here. So now you're never going to encounter this on another fight. To my knowledge, this is it. This actually does make casting Aaron Ryan more difficult. So you should note that, Aaron Ryan is a bit more difficult than normal just because of these variables. Now, to my knowledge, no other fight has these variables, obviously because it's exclusive to him, but you know what I'm talking about. But I just thought I would mention it just in case you start saying, hey, I'm trying to do Aaron Ryan, but he has this variable here. Now, this is the one thing I do not have an answer for. I've never tried to task Aaron Ryan. It is decently, it is more significantly difficult than normal. So I just thought I'd give you a bit of a warning for that one. Now, trying to think if there's anything I have not covered. Now that's pretty much it for tasking. Really, you just got to remember how to change the RNG of the attacks, how to do opponents that have two different attacks, how to deal with directionals. That is, well, that's pretty much it. Now, if you actually do a task and you do make an improvement, you might want to, tell the Discord about it, I'll leave a link to the Discord in the description. It's a fun place, but you'll notice that the first thing that people are going to ask you is, what are the odds of it? Now, you might not actually know how to calculate these, but it's actually really, really simple. We're going to use Disco Kid as an example. Now, Disco Kid has 3 different attacks. Now, Disco Kid actually only requires 1 attack, his uppercut. Now, Disco Kid actually needs, hold up one second, I don't remember all this. I believe it's about 12 attacks. We'll go with 12 attacks. It doesn't really matter how many he actually has because the formula is not going to change. Now, the basic formula that we are going to use for every fight is this. Oh, I made a mistake. Hold on one second. I hate this keyboard. There we go. It's x to the power of y. Now x is the odds of an attack, and y is how many times you need that attack. So we're using Disco Kid as an example. Since he has 3 possible attacks, x is equal to 1 over 3. 1 over 1 in 3. Because, well, there's 3 attacks, and you need 1 of those attacks, so it's a 1 out of 3 chance, obviously. Now let's say we need him to do that attack 12 times. So, y is going to equal 12. This is it. That's how you do odds. It is that simple. Now let's say we get a multi-attack fight. One of those attacks, one of those that, well, that is just a slight bit more complicated. It's, we do have that x to the power of y, but then, add a bit of spice to it, we have x to the power of y again. So, let's say that one of those attacks is 1 in 3 and you need it 4 times. Now, 1 in 4, you're going to need it like 4 times. Let's say that. Oh, here. Jesus, it is late. And let's say that one of his attacks is like 1 in 6, and we need to happen, let's go, 8 times. That's it. That is a multi-attack fight. Now let's spice this equation up just a bit more. Let's say that this 1 in 6 to 8, those are directional attacks. Now you do actually have to take directional into account, because even though we did change it so that you get a star off of that left body instead of having to change to right body, that's not going to happen in casual play. You do need that right body. Now, let's say that, well, now let's add 1 and 2, because, well, he has 2 directions that he can go. So now, we're going to add, that's it. This is as complicated as the math gets. There is nothing that you are going to encounter that's going to get more complicated than this. Now, this is a pretty insane odds fight, but if you're going to TAS in this game, you better get used to that, because this game is pure RNG. The odds are not in your favor. So we use TAS to get things that would be otherwise pretty much impossible. There are a lot of fights that actually get into the 1 in a billion odds. I actually think we have a couple that go into the trillions. Oh, it's insane. But that's really as simple as that, you know? We've got... So just to recap, this is a 1 attack fight. That's it. This is a 2 attack fight. That's 2 attacks, and this is us adding directionals into it. That's it. I believe I have covered everything, but if you do have any questions, you can just let me know in the comments. I will gladly answer any of them. Otherwise, though, that's honestly pretty much it. You're honestly ready at this point. Remember, though, before you do a TAS, you should really get a feel for the fight. You shouldn't just jump head first. I would really suggest only TASing fights that you know well. Because if you don't know fights well, you might just start doing things that can actually be possible. You might forget a guaranteed attack, or you might forget that one attack is faster than the other. So it's just getting a really good feel for the fight before you start TASing it and getting times that aren't actually possible. Till then, have a good day.